You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
Welcome to Scuderia F1, the podcast that's always up to speed with the latest Formula One news. Follow us on Twitter at Scuderia F1 Pod and subscribe to the show on iTunes and Stitcher. Now, here are your hosts, Mark Dailey and Kevin Laramée.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Scuderia F1, the podcast that is always up to speed with Formula One racing. Mark Dailey here, flying solo for this episode. Unfortunately, my friend and partner and co-host, Kevin Laramée, is away this week. Kevin needed some time in the simulator to get ready for the next race in Spain in a couple of weeks' time. And, we hope that he's all up to speed and back with us very soon. And I'm going to do my very, very best to try and keep this thing going and not to put it into the barrier in the next 15 to 20 minutes or even half an hour. I haven't really set a time limit to do the program this week, so let's just see how I do on my own here. And if I start to ramble a little bit, then please forgive me. I don't have a co-host this week, obviously, to keep me in check and keep me focused. Well, wow, what a race that was the other night in Baku at the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Valtteri Bottas, my goodness, do you not feel sorry for Valtteri Bottas? Played it smart the entire race, kept his nose clean, didn't really see a whole lot of Valtteri. Obviously, he spent a vast majority of the race in second position behind Sebastian Vettel, and then inherited the lead, which was, I think, some good work and good strategy from Mercedes, only to be robbed of a victory a couple of laps from the end after picking up a puncture on that very, very long start-finish straight at Baku. Now, before we talk about the race itself and some of the other news that's making its way around the F1 paddock today, there is a rumor going around that came out via Ziggo Sports in the Netherlands, and has been reported by Jack Ploy that perhaps, just perhaps, we have witnessed the very, very last Azerbaijan Grand Prix at Baku. And it sounds like, and this of course still has to be confirmed, that perhaps, and just perhaps, we will see another US-based Grand Prix in 2019 and beyond in, let's just wait for it. Did anybody guess Miami? Well, if you guess Miami, perhaps that might be another new race to look forward to, or not, depending on how that plays out and depending what the circuit may be. If it's going to be a street circuit somewhat similar to Baku, which, honestly, guys, if Baku is in fact going to be dropped from the F1 calendar for 2019 and beyond, I'm going to be a little bit disappointed, honestly. The first year, 2 years ago in 2016, was a little bit, it was new for everyone, right? I mean, the track didn't really look all that exciting, but it's become very unpredictable. I mean, it doesn't really have very many spectators. Compared to some of the more well-attended Grand Prix around the world. I mean, it really is a friends and family event, and which is kind of ironic when you think about it. I mean, it's right in the heart of a very large city, and there aren't really all that many grandstands. But over the past couple of years, it has really, really grown on me. I mean, last year was one of the most interesting races of the entire year. Obviously, we have seen over the past 3 years at Baku that safety cars, it's just going to happen at some point or another. Somebody's going to put it into the wall. There's going to be some sort of accident, and they're going to have to slow the field down, clean up, get the track back to a safe condition. And it was very much the same thing again this past weekend. However, the race promoter, the organizer, he's come out and said a couple things over the weekend, which kind of doesn't, I wouldn't say really fans the fire, but doesn't really give any confidence to people who would like to see the race stay at Baku City. He basically said that they have no plans. They haven't re-upped for anything beyond 2020. So, there you go. I mean, it was 4 or 5 years, obviously, by that count. And then the other thing that he was saying is that, it almost kind of sounded like he was talking about beyond this sort of 4 to 5 years that they were given the contract to host a Grand Prix. It sounded like beyond that, if they were to host it beyond 2020, it was almost like the law of diminishing returns. He thought that if you're going to make any money or make any profit, it would be in the first 3 to 4 years. And then beyond that, it was almost using the publicity and I wouldn't say notoriety. I think publicity is the best word of having a Grand Prix in that city to boost tourism, to get the city more visible. So we'll wait and see. The rumor does say that the pit facilities have been sold to a race organizer in Miami. So who knows? Perhaps they will be racing on the sunny shores and streets of South Beach come 2019. But how about that? I was just talking just now about poor Valtteri Bottas, but even before that, what an interesting qualifying session we had there. Of course, Sebastian Vettel, once again, he gets the pole position, and unfortunately, he didn't really have any backup from his teammate Kimi Räikkönen, who kind of blew it there on his last hot lap in Q3, ended up qualifying all the way back in 6th position next to Max Verstappen on row number 3, leaving Sebastian to fend off the mighty Mercedes duo of Lewis Hamilton and Valtteri Bottas. And, full disclosure here, being in Canada, being on the west coast of North America, a race that is going live in a place like Baku, which is in not quite the Middle East, but the very extremities of Europe, kind of pushes the envelope time zone-wise, I guess you could say, for a decent hour that I'm willing to get up on first thing on a Sunday morning to watch a Grand Prix. I think it was on, about 5 a.m. in the morning here, which, honestly, guys, I ain't getting out of bed for anything at 5 a.m. on a Sunday morning, even Formula One. I'll wait a little bit later and watch it after I've recorded it on the DVR with a cup of coffee, have my breakfast, sit there, relax, get my timing app open, and just sit down and enjoy it. But, maybe just a little tangent aside, I could even do that right away, because when I went down a little bit later on in the morning, I was cursing myself for being too darn lazy, not getting up when the race was on live. I found out that my DVR had in fact not recorded the race, and I had to wait several more hours until Sunday night, in fact, before the race was made available on demand via TSN, the sports network up here in Canada. So by the time it was ready to go, unfortunately, I'd already seen that Lewis Hamilton won the Grand Prix via a Facebook post, and I was a little bit angry with myself, because whenever there's a situation like that and I'm not able to watch the race live or watch it whenever I want to, I do my very best to stay away from Twitter, stay away from Facebook, stay away from Instagram, just basically stay away from the internet. And then my iPhone 8 just becomes a phone, and, honestly, what fun is that? Anyhow, that is my little story of misfortune. But compared to some of the other guys that we saw during the race, not really a lot to complain about. But it was a fascinating Grand Prix once again. And like I was saying, it was, of course, very unpredictable. I mean, the first lap with everybody trading paint, bumping into each other, Kimi Räikkönen shunting poor Esteban Ocon into the corner. I don't know about you guys. The stewards ruled it was a racing incident, equal to blame, no penalties handed out. I mean, in fairness, Esteban was a little bit in front of Kimi going into the corner, but he pulled over to the far side of the track, left the door wide open. And if you're Kimi Räikkönen, why are you not going to have a look? Why are you not going to try and stick your car up the inside of that corner? I mean, it looked like a little bit of wishful thinking on behalf of Kimi Räikkönen. Fortunately for Kimi, apart from a broken front wing, which he promptly had replaced, it didn't cause him too much damage. He was able to continue. He dropped all the way down, and, well, I mean, Kimi being Kimi, you're never going to get anything other than the dry, the very quiet, the very reserved reaction on the podium. But to finish where he did after all that was absolutely amazing. I don't think anybody expected Kimi Räikkönen to finish where he did. I mean, I think that was obviously second position, considering the weekend he had and some of the unfortunate luck that he had. I think he has to be extremely happy. I mean, he's had a couple of things maybe not go 100% his way so far this year, but a fantastic result for Kimi. But I mean, Lewis Hamilton, another guy, and I don't want to hate on Lewis, but I mean, I love him. Great guy, great driver. I mean, 4-time world champion. I mean, how can you argue with that? I mean, Lewis has been one of the most dominating drivers in recent times. Certainly the driver in the V6 hybrid turbo era that's been in play now for the past several years. So, I mean, to see Lewis not really dominating and really on top of things like we've come to expect over the course of, certainly the past several years and for the majority of his career, is definitely something that is a lot different and certainly takes a little bit getting used to. And Lewis himself said that he spent a little bit of time to commiserate with Valtteri Bottas. I still feel sorry for the guy. I mean, to have a race victory yanked away from you like that, literally on the very last lap of the race. Hey, but that's motor racing, that's Formula One. But I think it shows a certain amount of maturity that I think Lewis realized that he hasn't been at his best and that he's still coming to terms with the new 2018 Mercedes, the W09, and he's said as much. But I mean, I think that's a classy move on the behalf of Lewis Hamilton. And just out of nowhere, he's kind of snuck right back up to the lead in the World Drivers' Championship with 70 points, leading Sebastian Vettel, who another guy that's had a bit of bad luck. I mean, obviously, unfortunately, we were busy last week and were unable to record our thoughts on the Chinese Grand Prix, but that, I think, if we can circle back for a moment, was definitely an avoidable incident in China. That crash between Sebastian Vettel and Max Verstappen. Max deservedly being reprimanded for that move. I mean, Max, another guy, an extremely exciting Formula One driver, an extremely talented racer, but that was never going to be a move that was going to stick. I mean, you look at his teammate, Danny Ricciardo, the guy that's kind of really mastered the art of late braking and really being able to make these overtaking maneuvers, because that was a fantastic finish to that race in China. And Danny Rick, definitely full value for money to win that one. And sadly for Max, that was not only a situation where he ended up getting reprimanded, but also it was a situation that forced Vettel down the order, and of course he was didn't get full points that he probably could have. Obviously, he would have been one of the favorites to win that race. And of course that didn't happen, and now that's coming back to a certain degree to haunt him. But I mean, he's only 4 points behind Lewis in the World Championship. 17 races still to go. I mean, come on, it's May 1st today when most of you guys are going to be listening to this program. This season is still going all the way to the end of this year. Abu Dhabi is not until the 25th of November. I mean, that's still like 6 months away. There is a lot of racing between now and then, and Seb himself has said that he's not really too concerned about what's happened in the past two races. I mean, he's still got fourth place in Azerbaijan, not the end of the world. And hey, you know, we have sat here, myself especially, I've been very critical about the lack of passing in Formula One, but for some reason that track at Baku City seems to really work, and you get that awesome long straightaway, and you see guys going for it right at the end. And I mean, why not? If you're Sebastian Vettel, you saw an opportunity, you tried to outbrake Valtteri Bottas into the first corner. He didn't make it stick, unfortunately. And just with the pack being fairly close together, coming off of that final safety car period, Seb obviously came off a little bit worse to wear, but that's been one of my criticisms. I mean, of course, you have these force fields around these cars with the aero effect that makes it very difficult for cars to get close to one another and to pass, but the combination of that long straightaway and DRS, it works there for some reason. And all credit for Vettel for trying to make the move. And hey, this time it didn't work, but who knows? Maybe next time it will. But we did see certainly plenty of overtaking on that straightaway, not just this year, but last year. Obviously, Bottas made that move to overtake Lance Stroll last year to secure second position in that race, and just pipped Lance to the finish line to get on the second step of the podium. Of course, that was a race that was kind of turned on its head last year in that very dramatic safety car period when Sebastian Vettel was very, very convinced that Lewis Hamilton brake tested him, and then did that bizarre thing where he pulled around and then intentionally collided with Lewis Hamilton, and was obviously, I think, a situation I can't recall seeing, not in the modern era of Formula One at any rate. And just kind of going back to what I was saying a little bit earlier, that it's a moment like that has really made Baku really grow on me over the past couple of years. It's been unpredictable, and the safety car periods really make for an interesting time. But let's talk about the big talking point from the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Obviously, it was the final safety car period that came into effect several laps from the end of the race, when Daniel Ricciardo and Max Verstappen, going into turn one, collided with one another and breaking the number one rule. There's two rules in Formula One. Rule number one, don't crash into your teammate. Rule number two, if uncertain about rule number one, go back and reread rule number one. And the stewards decided that they were both equally at fault. Niki Lauda came out. He had a little bit more to say. He said that he thought it was 70-30, more of Max Verstappen's fault. Christian Horner, team principal at Red Bull Racing, was just super pissed off with both of them, said that they're both in the doghouse. They've both been summoned back to the Red Bull factory to apologize to everyone before the next race in Barcelona in a couple of weeks' time. And apparently they had actually discussed the possibility of a collision before the race. Certainly there was an incident earlier in the race when Ricciardo was trying to pass Max again into turn one. He did get around him, but went a little bit deep into that corner. And then Max, of course, and I don't know about you guys, but I thought I had flashbacks of Hungary 2017. Max locked it up a little bit. He sort of drifted out to the right side of the track. Ricciardo coming back after running a little bit wide. They bumped, a little bit of smoke off of the tires, but I had almost a flashback of Verstappen doing what he did in Hungary last year and then putting his right front wheel through Danny Ricciardo's radiator, but it didn't happen that time. However, I mean, you got to be furious if you're Christian Horner. I mean, you had both of your cars running very, very well, and then in a flash, they're both out. And for those of you who didn't see it, and how could you not at this point in time? I mean, that replay is all over the place now. If you go to F1.com, the official Formula One website, they have an article up that has, I think, every available camera angle showing that accident between the two. And Verstappen makes two minor moves. Ricciardo threw a dummy, and Max made a little flick to the right and then to the left. Ricciardo, I think, maybe was expecting both of those. However, I think he had more eyes directly on the car in front of him, that being Max Verstappen, than perhaps maybe where he was on the track, and left his braking too late. As we know, as I said a little earlier, that Ricciardo is one of these guys that has mastered the art of late braking to get around cars, and this time it came back to bite him. So Ricciardo, I think that obviously took a bit of the wind out of his sails. I mean, he's been flying high after winning that race in China a couple of weeks ago. I mean, his name's been tossed out there with possibly a move to Mercedes or Ferrari next year, or possibly staying with Red Bull in 2019 and beyond. And for a guy that can win a race without being on the front row of the grid, why wouldn't you want him if you're any one of those top three teams? And honestly, if you're Ricciardo, where else are you going to go? Red Bull apparently has already started discussions with Honda of all manufacturers, if this is to be believed, about securing power units for 2019 and, well, at least for the next couple of years. Of course, everything is still up in the air and uncertain after the current set of regulations expires in 2020. Still don't really know what 2021 is going to look like, even though Ross Brawn has come out from the Formula One side, the management side, to outline what they think would be a good set of regulations and rules moving forward. So who knows? Very interesting. Certainly, we've seen with the Red Bull Junior team, Toro Rosso, they've had some promising results. Obviously, Pierre Gasly getting a P4 in Bahrain about a month ago, an amazing result. And the thing was, that didn't just seem like a fluke at the time. Obviously, he was strong all weekend, so full value for money. Hasn't been able to recreate that since in China, and Baku kind of flipped around, although he was running fairly decently at one point in the race. Had a clash with Kevin Magnussen right at the very end of the race, so I think that Gasly's results, where he finished up at the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, way down in, let's take a look, and where was it? All the way down in 12th position. So, not really what we come to expect from Gasly, but promising nonetheless, even though maybe the final result doesn't really reflect it. And then his teammate Brendan Hartley scoring a single point for coming home in P10. So not a bad result for him, but it looks like Honda slowly but surely is getting things figured out. And when they returned in 2015 with McLaren, we all know the drama. We all know that sad story, and just how crazy that all was, and how that worked out. And obviously, I think that was a good move. And if you're Red Bull, you've got the Renault or the Tag Heuer branded Renault engine, those power units, and they've never really been able to recreate the magic that Renault Red Bull partnership had prior to the turbo era starting in 2014. And you can see why they've been frustrated. It's just even, I think, going back to 2014, Red Bull and Christian Horner weren't happy with the power that Renault was supplying them. And that would not be a big surprise if they were to find an alternative power supplier, or engine supplier, I should say. But Honda definitely seems like a bit of a surprise, but it's no risk for them, really. I mean, they could stick with Renault, and it's basically a try before you buy. I mean, they're getting a lot of feedback, obviously, from Toro Rosso, so I would say that they're going into these discussions with Honda with eyes wide open. But just talking about Renault themselves, you had to think that there was probably some good feelings going around for the for that French engine manufacturer. When you looked earlier in the race, when you had the two Red Bulls and the two Renault Works cars fighting for it, and it was really, really interesting to see. Unfortunately, Nico Hülkenberg put it into the wall and retired in the first. I'd say the first quarter of the race, so that was disappointing. But Carlos Sainz, I think, acquitted himself very well, and actually came home in P5. So a very decent result for Carlos Sainz. So very, very interesting. And of course, the two McLarens, Fernando Alonso, after that, just unreal sort of sandwich that he got caught in at the beginning of the race with Sergei Sirotkin in the Williams, and then the aforementioned Nico Hülkenberg ended up with two punctured tires, right rear, managed to limp all the way back to the pits, had a bit of damage to the floor, still managed to bring it back in P7. Fantastic results for Fernando Alonso. I mean, P7 doesn't really seem all that flattering for a double world champion like Fernando, but hey, come on, the guy managed to get it around the second longest track in Formula One on two wheels with bits of rubber flying off all over the place, considering all the problems, all the disappointment, all the frustration that McLaren went through over the past several years. I think that's a great result for him and his teammate Stoffel van Dorn coming home in P9. So again, very, very decent result for them. And just one final note on Fernando, him getting that car all the way around like he did, I think it just goes to prove how good of a Formula One driver, just how good of a race car driver Fernando Alonso actually is. All right. Well, where do we go from here? Definitely, I guess, well, I think we should just maybe finish up that the discussion with the two Red Bull drivers, Danny Ricciardo and Max Verstappen. And I don't know what it's like between them. Definitely, it doesn't seem like as cold and as toxic as, say, the last high-profile inter-teammate battle between Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg in those 3 or 4 years just before Rosberg won his world championship and then retired in 2016. I mean, to say that the relationship between those two guys was icy is probably a little bit of an understatement, but they had their comings together, obviously, at Barcelona 2016, and then in Spa, I believe was that 2014, 2015? No, I think it was 2014 when they came together on the first lap, and then Lewis picked up a puncture, dropped all the way back to the back of the field, had to limp all the way around, basically an entire lap of Spa, and that basically ruined his afternoon. And Mercedes basically had to sit down with both of them and had to and basically say, we're going to let you guys race, but if things like this happen again, that we will bring the law down on you guys, and if we have to fire one of you, then so be it. So will that happen with Max Verstappen and Daniel Ricciardo? Well, it's hard to say. I mean, they're both obviously very talented drivers, and you would think that that reason and logic and calmer attitudes, I guess you could say, are going to prevail at some points. But definitely, I think that that Red Bull, I think that Christian Horner and company have to set down some rules of engagement and let them know what's going to go and what's going to pass and what is acceptable and what isn't. Just draw that line in the sand. Let those two guys know this is the deal. And if there's a transgression, if you step over that line, and if we have a repeat of what we had in China, then there are going to be consequences for that. And I think that's what you have to do. You never really want to pull in, I think, one of your drivers, especially when they're doing well, they're getting results. But again, you just cannot run into your own teammate. You guys just can't take each other out and nullify what was a very, very promising result for them. And of course, it drops them right down. So before I start wrapping this one up, let's just take a quick look at the Constructors' Championship. First place is Ferrari, and obviously first place is Ferrari in first place, brought to you by the Department of Redundancy Department. Ferrari on 114 points, only 4 points ahead of Mercedes with 110. Red Bull Racing, the next nearest team to challenge these two, and they are, they're miles back, literally. Third spot, 55 points. And fourth position in the Constructors' Championship, a very respectable 36 points for McLaren Renault, and we'll see where they go. And then the Renault Works team themselves, only a single point behind McLaren with 35. So definitely Renault seems to be getting stronger and stronger each year. Obviously, after buying or taking over the Lotus team a couple of years ago, they said it was about a 5-year mid-range project to get back to the top of Formula One, and we have seen these slow incremental steps each and every year after they've taken over the Lotus team, and they are slowly moving that advancing, bringing the team forward. And you got to wonder, where are they going to be next year and the year after? Are they going to be challenging for race victories and world championships? We'll wait and see, but it's looking good. Definitely, it's nice to see Renault there. Obviously, a team that has a lot of ties to Formula One and has got the job done in the past. All right, so let's take a quick look at the World Drivers' Championship. First place, as I mentioned earlier, Lewis Hamilton, the 4-time world champion, is on top with 70 points, leading another 4-time world champion, Sebastian Vettel, who is leading another former world champion, Kimi Räikkönen, who has 48 points, Sebastian 66 points, Valtteri Bottas in 4th position with 40 points. I mean, obviously, it's going to be those guys, the top 4 drivers, the top 2 teams. But Danny Rick, 5th position, 37 points, just a mere 3 points behind his rival, Valtteri Bottas. And then in 6th position, Fernando Alonso, the double world champion, 28 points on the season so far, so very, very decent. 7th, 8th, and 9th, and 10th. First is Nico Hülkenberg, 7th position, 22 points. Max Verstappen, 8th position, 18 points. Sergio Perez, who got 3rd position, and congratulations to him for his finish in Baku. 9th position, 15 points. And then Carlos Sainz rounds off the top 10 with 13 points. Anyways, you guys, I think that's a good place to leave it for this edition of Scuderia F1. The podcast is always up to speed with Formula One racing. I've managed to keep this going a lot longer than I originally thought. I thought, hey, if I can get 15 minutes out of this myself, then I'm doing good. As it is, I'm pushing about almost half an hour. I always say that, when it's me and Kevin both doing the show, it ends up almost being 50-50. So if Kevin was here, we probably would have gotten a full hour by the time we got some more F1 news in, got some more analysis, more discussion. But hey, it is what it is. Anyhow, thank you very, very much for listening. If you want to keep up to date, follow us on Twitter at Scuderia F1 Pod. You can follow me on Twitter at MarkJRDailey, and that is Dailey with an L-E-Y at the end. And if you want to follow Kevin, give him a follow at Kev Laramée on Twitter. Anyways, that's a wrap. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll catch you again this time next week.
Thanks for listening to the Scuderia F1 podcast. If you want to get the show notes for this episode, then head over to ScuderiaF1pod.com. Want to get in touch with us? Then email us at ScuderiaF1pod@gmail.com.
You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.